Hi there. You know, stories about zombies are as old as the horror genre itself. There was always a great fascination about people dying and coming back to life as monsters. Well, but in 2010, this whole horror genre was taken to a whole new level with the show The Walking Dead. The production of the American television station AMC is originally based on a comic by Robert Kirkman, which was first released in 2003. In this, as in the show, the police officer Rick Grimes wakes up from a coma in a hospital and suddenly finds himself in a zombie apocalypse, and the plot takes its course. What fascinated me so incredibly about this show back then, you build a super close relationship with all the characters you see, and from one moment to the next, they are bitten by zombies and die. And the fact that you simply could not predict this in any way was something I had never seen like that in a show before. There are 177 episodes in total, as well as various spin-offs of the series. In 2022, however, the original show finally ended with season 11. This famous horror show was filmed in and around Atlanta in Georgia, the place I am right now, so it's time for a new movie location tour. So, here we are. I just arrived at my first shooting location for today, and I thought, well, let's start our shooting location tour just like the series The Walking Dead starts. You might remember the scene when Rick arrives with his police car at a road crossing, then he sees an accident, and then he meets his very first walker girl at a gas station, the gas station I am right now, and yeah, then he shoots this walker girl. Well, that's how the whole series The Walking Dead starts, and yeah, let's see if we will find the shooting location. Yeah, I hope you're ready for the big moment. Here it is, the famous opening scene from the first episode of The Walking Dead. Rick arrives, and this is what the whole scene looks like today in reality. In real life, of course, we are not in a zombie apocalypse. That means I can't stand in the middle of the street here to capture the exact same perspective, because there's actually a lot of traffic going on here. But luckily there is a traffic light here, a pedestrian traffic light here on the right. We can stand right next to it, and from here we can have a closer look at this intersection. As a point of reference, here on the left side of the road in the series scene, we can see a yellow pedestrian traffic light, and that's the one that we can also see here on the left side in my perspective. And over here we of course see the street where Rick arrives with his police car. And if we take a closer look at the street, we can also see that not much has changed here in the past 14 years. Here on the right, for example, right next to Rick's car, we can see two small trees, and behind them a huge forest area, and we can still see these today. The trees have apparently gotten a bit bigger. Today we can see a brown sign here on the right that they may have taken down for the show. However, these street signs we can see here on the left side are still here. What has changed a little bit are the road markings here. In the show we can see a zebra crossing like painting on the street, which now, 14 years later, is pretty peeled off. You could say that the street definitely looked a bit better maintained during the zombie apocalypse than it does today. The camera pans to the right, and we see Rick's police car again up close, which then stops here on this corner. Directly behind the police car we can see a blue sign, a signpost to, I don't know, some restaurant or something, some tourist attraction, I don't know. Today, 14 years later, this blue sign is no longer here. Instead, we have now another sign here. I cannot really read what's written on there. And for the sake of completeness, here's the whole scene again from this perspective. Rick walks across the intersection to this completely shredded car. In the background we can see this beautiful green forest area and the yellow pedestrian traffic light again. Yeah, that was filmed from over here. And now it's finally time to check out the gas station that I mentioned before. As you might remember, Rick walks across the intersection and then he walks under this gas station sign that shows the gas station prices. Obviously, nothing has changed in the past 14 years here, but what has definitely changed is the price of diesel. It cost $2.99 back then and now it costs $4.49, and I actually have no idea what this actually means, because in the USA fuel prices are not given in liters like in Europe where I live, but in gallons, and I have absolutely no idea at all how to convert that. If you're bored and you like mathematics, maybe write a comment down below. How much is the diesel in euros and in liters? Tell me, I'd like to know. Well, and then Rick finally arrives at the gas station, which was completely lined up with shredded cars for the show. They put a lot of stuff everywhere to make it look like the zombie apocalypse. For example, there's also a sign hanging here, no gas. But what is even more important for us is, does the gas station still look the same as it did in the series? And the answer is yes, it still looks exactly the same like it did in the show. It's obviously exactly the same gas station, which we can also see from these numbers here. Gas pump 1 and 2. These signs look exactly the same as they did 14 years ago. But unlike in the show, today there is fuel and I actually just refueled here. Yeah, it was a very special experience and the gas station attendant was super friendly. So if you're in the area, my recommendation, 5 stars. You can fill up your car here and the best thing, there aren't any walkers here.
Das Ziel befindet sich auf der rechten Seite.
So, we continue chronologically. The next place on our list is the hospital, where Rick wakes up at the beginning of the show, The Walking Dead, and then he walks around and he's wondering, what the heck is going on here? Well, actually, that's also what I just thought, because the hospital looks a bit different than in the show. Yeah, and here's the scene we all know from the show. Rick comes out of the hospital and finds a world that no longer exists, or at least not as he once knew it. Well, and surprise, this is how this whole scene looks like today in real life. And we can see, yeah, there's something different here. The hospital that Rick comes out of here on the right no longer exists. Here in the film scene we can see the stairs on the right where he comes down. Then he comes into a courtyard. I think there are body bags lying there, right? Yeah, and then there is a driveway here on the left side right next to the building. I've been trying to figure out what exactly this building was, and at least I've come to the conclusion that it wasn't a hospital. There is a Christian homeless shelter here that has its offices and halls on this entire site. The organization is called Atlanta Mission, and as far as I found out, this building also used to belong to this organization until it was torn down. Yeah, today we can only see relics here, for example some walls of the former building that are still standing here. The stairs are definitely gone, and here on the right side there was also a wall they demolished. Now they built up a wall here, well, not a wall but a wall. But this street we can see here on the left is still here, and once again I have to say, during the zombie apocalypse it looked a bit better. Today it looks even dingier than in the show. There are a few more potholes today. Well, but behind it you can see a residential area, and you can also still see the residential building here that we can also see in the show. The hospital, however, is gone forever. Luckily, what hasn't disappeared is what we can see in the next scene. Rick then walks across this lawn towards a large parking lot that looks like this today. It's exactly the same parking lot I just parked. Yeah, and we can still see the building that we can also see in the show. It's still here today with the difference that it looks much nicer today than in the show. No bomb hit in there. This was obviously retouched with CGI. Yeah, and the entire parking lot was then filled with a helicopter and lots of military trucks. This, of course, is no longer the case today. Yeah, and this building obviously belongs, as far as I found out, also to this aid organization Atlanta Mission. So it's not a hospital. Yeah, and for the sake of completeness, I would also like to show you this building from the front view again, because you can also see that in the show. Here we can also see that there are some construction works going on at this building right now. And what we can also see is that this building is obviously being supported. Take a look here. There are a lot more pillars on the right. Well, it seems to me that this building is pretty dilapidated and that they are renovating this building right now. But one thing can be said, it still looks at least a little bit better than in the show The Walking Dead. So, what happens next? Right, Rick walks out of the hospital and then he walks straight back home to see if everything is okay. And of course, it's not. Well, and here's the house of Rick Grimes. And here he comes out of his house, our main character, Rick. And this is what the house looks like today in real life. Yeah, there are a few things that we can discover here. In the zombie apocalypse, for example, we have a very unkept garden. That's definitely not like that anymore. What we can also see is that there is a swing hanging here on the left. And also the staircase looks bad in the show. Seems like they renovated it within the past 14 years. It also has a railing today. In the garden today we find wonderfully trimmed bushes and hedges everywhere. Definitely doesn't look like it did back in the show. However, not that much has changed at the house itself. Apparently it has a few new windows and also the house number has changed. It used to be on this pillar. Today it hangs above the porch, which is actually quite interesting because in shows and movies they often change the house numbers. Well, here in The Walking Dead it's not like that. This is the reverse shot. Rick is walking down the stairs and in the background we can see the other side of the street. That tree that Rick is looking at is still there. Also the power pole right next to it is still there. What we can see, however, is that the street looks a bit different today. Apparently a cycle path has been added here. Yeah, seems like it wasn't here 14 years ago. Rick then rolls down the grass toward the sidewalk and that was filmed from over here. This is what it looks like today here. Apparently this entire street has been upgraded because this curb on the right has also been rebuilt. Yeah, and in this scene we can also see that a lot of things have changed when it comes to bushes and hedges and stuff like that. Everything is beautifully freshly trimmed today. That was definitely not the case in the zombie apocalypse. Rick then looks down the street of his neighborhood and spots a walker, or Morgan, or both, I guess. In this scene we can see a historical monument in the background. In fact, there are actually two historical monuments, because here on the left is the entrance to a huge green park area where, among other things, also the Atlanta Zoo is located. So Rick's neighborhood is actually next to a huge green area with lots of forests and nature. And actually we can also see a bit of that in the series. If you remember the scene where Rick finds this bike and then, I think, meets one of his first walkers, or even his first walker. Yeah, that was also filmed at the edge of a forest. And also in this scene right here, you can see quite clearly that there's a lot of green nature here. Yeah, and then let's walk a little bit around the corner, more precisely just 2 or 3 blocks to the right, because in this residential area we will not only find Rick's house, but also, as in the show, Morgan's house. This is what it looks like in the show. And this is what it looks like today in real life. We see that the paint has obviously changed. In the show it has a yellow color, which has already peeled off a bit. Look at the fence and everything. Yeah, it looks a bit like the zombie apocalypse. Today, 14 years later, it looks really beautiful, modern. And also a bit of work has been done to this house. It obviously has a slightly longer veranda today. Take a look here, this right window. You can no longer see that. There is a porch right in front of it today. The garden in front of the house has now been fenced off. The house on the right, however, still looks almost the same like it did 14 years ago. The paint is still the same. However, something has changed on the roof of the building. 2 chimneys were apparently removed here. Yeah, also in this area they obviously did a bit of renovation in recent years. Time for one of the most iconic scenes from the show The Walking Dead, the scene we all remember when we think about this show. It's the scene when Rick Grimes rides with his horse into town, and in the background we can see the huge skyline of Atlanta, and all of that was filmed right here at this bridge, and here's the skyline. Yeah, and this is a scene in which a lot of computer effects were used, or CGI as we hobby film experts like to say, because this is what this street looks like today in reality. It doesn't look like the scene from the show at all. Well, the skyline of Atlanta looks like in the show, but the street in front of it is totally different. In real life, there is actually no railway line on the right-hand side. In the show, we can see all these derailed trains. Instead, there is a two-lane road going into the city on the right-hand side, and then there are two more lanes go off to the right here. What they did here on the left side of the street is also quite interesting. There is this green island with the tree or with a bush on it. You can also see that in the show, but what they did here is they put hundreds of cars on this little single lane road. And if you take a really close look, it also doesn't really look very realistic, especially when you compare it to the real life scene. And what they also did is they put some kind of a factory building here on the left side of the street, which is also not here in reality. In reality, there are residential buildings over here. But what has remained basically untouched is the Atlanta skyline in the background. If you look at all these skyscrapers here, they actually still look exactly the same as they did in the show. They built a bridge here. You see that? I didn't notice that. They put a bridge over the street for the show. Yeah, also that bridge doesn't really exist in real life. So, let's jump a bit in the plot and let's take a look at season 4 of The Walking Dead, where we get to know Terminus. You might remember that's one of those gated communities we see in The Walking Dead a lot of times. Terminus used to be on an old industrial area, which is over here. Unfortunately, it's private property, so we can't go there. But yeah, we can take a look from over here. And here it is, the Terminus building as we all know it from the show, and this is what it looks like today in real life. In fact, this building is of course not a zombie safe zone. It is actually an old hall where railways were once repaired, but that is no longer the case today. Today there is a company here called Collier Metals LLC, so apparently a metal processing company or something like that, and they today use this large factory building for their business. But what we can see here in the show and also in reality, they didn't really change much in this area. There was obviously no need to change anything. A lot of those things that we can see here in the show apparently are no longer really used. For example, these train tracks here on the right, and here on the left we can also see some relics of this train repair business from back then, I think. All those cranes and stuff like that. Yeah, all of that doesn't really look like it's still in use today. What they did here for the show is, of course, they built a fence or something around the building so that the walkers can't get in. And of course, they put the letters Terminus on the building. It's quite interesting how diverse Atlanta is, right? Now we've also seen some industrial charm, but now I would say let's move on to our next filming location, and this one is a little bit outside the city. In the show The Walking Dead, we can see a lot of villages that look a bit run down and abandoned. Well, of course they are. There's a zombie apocalypse out there. But the funny thing is, also in reality, some of those places look a bit run down and abandoned, just like this place right here, a village called Grantville. Yeah, and of course, real The Walking Dead fans have already recognized which location from the show this actually is. Carl, Rick and Michonne set off to get some supplies, I guess, and then they end up in King County, which is Rick's hometown. And then they arrive right at this road crossing here where they meet Morgan, Rick's old friend, who is now pretty crazy and has built a lot of traps and even attacks them. Well, long story short, all of that was filmed from this perspective. Yeah, they put a lot of stuff here on the street for the show, but if you take a look at the houses around the street, they are original. They are still here also today in real life. There is this large white commercial building here on the left side with a few shops right next to it. At the end of the street there is also a residential building that you can see in the show, but also today in reality. And here on the right side there is also another large white building. And on the street Morgan wrote the words "turn around and live" in large letters. I can promise you I definitely won't stick to this instruction, because of course we also want to take a look at the reverse shot of this scenery. Here we can see our three main characters in front of this car full of holes. That was filmed from over here. In the scene we can see a little hill going up in the background, which is actually part of this railway line we can see here. And here we can already see in the background some of those, I would say, run down buildings that don't really look like there's something in there, but I will tell you more about that in a moment. First, let's have a look at this scene. Rick and Carl raising their hands in fear while Morgan stands on the roof and threatens to shoot them. Here we can see once again this building on the left. They didn't really change much for the show. Take a look at all the windows and doors. However, if you take a look at the buildings on the right side, there were many boards nailed at the doors and windows and stuff like that. But otherwise, it doesn't really look that much different here. Even this little tree is still here. What looks a little bit different is this reverse shot. You can see Rick and Carl and this white and yellow building in the background. They definitely covered it up with a lot of stuff. And to the right of this building, they have put up a fence that was probably never here. I'm pretty sure they just put it here for the show. If you take a look at the left side of this picture, however, you can see they didn't really take care of the details here, because in the show you can see these really nice trimmed bushes. The zombie apocalypse is already quite advanced at this point, so who actually trims those bushes? Huh? Is it the crazy Morgan? I don't think so, actually. Yeah, it seems like they didn't really pay attention to this detail. Today, however, we can see these bushes are no longer here at all. Okay, and now let's have a look how Grantville looks like on the other side of the train tracks. This is where things get interesting, because here we can discover a few abandoned houses and commercial buildings, and in some of them a bit of work is currently being done. I'm pretty sure that this building that we can see here in this scene was an empty building at that time when the show was filmed. And what we can also see in the show is that they decorated it with signs. On one of them it says King County, Rick's hometown. Yeah, that sign is definitely not here anymore in reality. In this scene, our three protagonists walk to the right, because there is also a green arrow pointing this way. Here we once again can see the building on the left, which is currently being renovated, and also the building on the right, which looks very abandoned. And in this scene we can see Michonne putting some stuff in the car. In this scene we can also see that they obviously did something to those houses here on the left. Some of them have new windows and stuff. And in the show, this street has been wonderfully decorated with all kinds of leaves and stuff to make it look like the zombie apocalypse. Yeah, that's definitely not the case anymore today. Well, and now I'd like to show you one of the most iconic scenes from this town of Grantville. It's the wall that Michonne, Carl and Rick are walking in front of, which has "Away with you" written on it. And guess what? This wall and also the letters "Away with you" are still here today. Absolutely nothing has changed in the scene. The old building with the backyard, the archway, the boards in front of the windows, this small footpath in front of it. And as you might remember, this "Away with you" wall was also shown in the intro of The Walking Dead. I think in season 2 or 3 or 4 or something, I don't really remember. In one of those seasons they changed the intro and they also put this wall "Away with you" into the intro. In this scene we can see the car is driving out of the town again. That was filmed from over here. My perspective is a little bit different because I didn't want to stand in this grass over here. But also in this scene we can clearly see that this wall on the left is still here. Then the building in the middle with that 3-part roof and the red building right beside it. In the show this building still has signs stands in front of the window. That's not the case anymore today. And also here in real life, you can see that this building is obviously empty. So you don't even need the zombie apocalypse that this town looks empty and abandoned. Well, and before we finally leave this important place, let's answer the question, why is that actually? Why are there so many abandoned houses and industrial buildings here in Grantville? Well, the answer is quite easy. The town of Grantville once experienced an extreme boom because cotton was produced here. And when this industry was declining, also the city fell into decline. Many residents left the town, and as a result, also many business went down. As a result, this city looked more and more like the apocalypse, and that's exactly what also inspired the producers of The Walking Dead to film a few scenes here. However, since the show came out, things have been looking up for Grantville, because since then, tourists are coming here like every day. And one person who benefits from this is Doug. I met him by chance here on the side of the road while I was taking my pictures. Doug has bought a lot of buildings here in the city, and as he says, without even knowing that The Walking Dead was filmed here.
I came down right in COVID 2000 into 2021 and bought up a lot of the buildings and started working on them, and I didn't realize that The Walking Dead was here either. And so I was working on them and didn't realize I was going to paint over that sign, and people said no. And really, we have people every day from all over the world stop by and take pictures. I had no idea what I bought, and then I saw people like stop and take. I was like, what are these people doing? I kept asking, like, what are all these people doing here? And people are like, this is Walking Dead. I'm like, I didn't get it because I never really watched the show, and I didn't realize. I just really did not realize what I bought.
Yeah, today he knows, and he also told me that he wants to keep the famous The Walking Dead buildings. So the Away With You sign, for example, will of course not be painted over. No, Doug actually wants to keep the famous places, but at the same time also offer a little bit more.
Now we're kind of rebuilding the town, turn it into like a little artsy music slash food place. So we have we kind of rebuilt. We have a coffee shop now. We're gonna have lofts. We're gonna have music. And Joe here bought the church, and he's turned that into a music venue. So just and that way, when people come here from The Walking Dead, they actually have something to go do. Besides, if you want to come, you feel like you can at least hang out and get something to eat and stay the night, and make more of a day of it than versus just breezing through for 5 minutes. Yeah.
Okay, that sounds great.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Das Ziel befindet sich auf der rechten Seite.
So, we've talked a lot about death and zombies. Now let's talk about love. Let's talk about the love story of Maggie and Glenn. To be precise, let's talk about the place where they make love the very first time, which was an old pharmacy building, the building right behind me. Yeah, and here we can experience the same phenomenon as in Grantville, because there is absolutely nothing going on in this small village here. We are now in Sharpsburg, which is about 20 minutes from Grantville, and we can see that, just like in the show, we are looking at many abandoned commercial buildings. And yeah, we can also see Steve's pharmacy in the background. In reality, it's not a pharmacy. There's absolutely nothing here in this building. We will have a closer look later. Yeah, but also the rest of the street looks like in the show. We take a step back in the storyline. This is the scene before Maggie and Glenn arrive at the pharmacy. Before that, they ride past this very old building. In the show, this is Shrug's hardware store, a DIY shop, obviously. And on the right side, there is also an entrance to a bar. In real life, this building is neither one nor the other, but apparently an antique dealer. Yeah, but it seems that the business isn't really booming either today. A traffic sign has been added here on the left side. You should watch out for children, it says. Yeah, I haven't seen any children here, but yeah, the sign is here. In this scene, we can see Maggie and Glenn riding into the village, and here we can see on the right side, there's obviously some kind of a residential area. Sharpsburg has about 300 residents. Yet in this scene we can also see that it looks quite similar here, like in the show. The little house here on the right is still here. It has a completely new paint today. Yet if you take a look at the nature right behind Maggie and Glenn, I think 1 or 2 trees have been lost, but this residential area right behind them is still here. You can still see those mailboxes that you can even see in the show. Yeah, and here once again, as I promised you, a close-up of the pharmacy building. Take what you need and God bless is written on a sign in this shop. And today, in real life, there is nothing here at all. Nothing you can take with you, because this building is just completely empty. The shop window we see in the show still looks quite similar. You can even see that they obviously painted it in recent years. This little roof or porch in front of the building looks as dilapidated as it does in the zombie apocalypse. Look at these pillars, how bent they are. Well, maybe Doug should also visit this village one day. Maybe he should open a pharmacy here. Maybe that's exactly the business idea this little town needs. Who knows? One of the most unpleasant persons of The Walking Dead is, maybe besides Negan, the governor. And the governor is the leader of Woodburry, a community that you can see right behind me. And here we have a wonderful view of Woodburry, which unfortunately we cannot really recreate in detail because it was filmed with a camera crane. Anyway, we can still see a lot of things here. In real life, this town is not the town of Woodburry, but the town of Senoia. And in contrast to the other places we just saw, this little town is quite busy. And not only that, it looks like they have modernized it a bit in the past few years. Take a look at the sidewalk here on the right, for example. It has a brick look today, which wasn't the case before. And a completely new building was built here on the right side, where there used to be a rose garden or a bush or something like that with a bench. Now there is a completely new building here, and only behind it we see this gray building, which you could already see in the show. On the left, we can see this iconic water tower that we see over and over again in the show. And also we can see a lot of those commercial buildings here on the left side of the road. They are also still here today. What they removed, of course, is this Woodbury infrastructure here on this median strip in the middle of the road. Those solar cells or whatever they built here. Yeah, of course, they are not really here in reality, but otherwise the scene looks pretty familiar, doesn't it? This is the reverse shot of this entire scene. Here we can see the residents of Woodbury walking along this sidewalk here. Yeah, the sidewalk looks different today, as I already mentioned. The building here on the left is completely new, as I also already mentioned. But what you can still see are those 2 buildings behind this new building with these typical American facades that you often see in these small American villages. And behind them, they built this barricade for the series so that the walkers couldn't get into this community. In reality, there is a railway line in the background and a long road that leads into the town and out of the town, the road that I also took to get into this town. Here are a few more scenes of this place. In this one, for example, you can see this slightly larger building in the background. Behind that, the large water tower. Everything still here. In this scene, we can see Andrea. Yeah, if there's anyone I hated from The Walking Dead, besides Negan and the governor, it's definitely Andrea. Jesus, she was so annoying. Yeah, Andrea is walking around in front of this building, which you can also see still here on the right. And here she is walking around in front of this building on the other side of the road that was filmed from over here. In each of these buildings are either nice little restaurants or boutiques and all sorts of other small shops. Not that much has changed on these buildings. 1 or 2 houses got a new color or a new door or a new sign, but not that much has changed here. And last but not least, another look down the street. There we can see the trucks and the governor is standing on one of them, acting like a complete idiot once again. Yeah, that was filmed from over here. Once again, we can see those buildings on the left side. And once again, we can see this zombie barricade from the show that is no longer here today.
Nacht 200 Metern links abbiegen auf Pylon Street. Das Ziel befindet sich auf der linken Seite.
Besides Woodburry, there is another famous community that is shown in the show The Walking Dead a lot of times for many seasons, and that is, of course, Alexandria. And I don't know if I remember that right, but I think in the show Alexandria is not next to Woodburry. Well, in reality it is. It's just a few hundred meters down the road. And here it is, the famous and, at least most of the time, very peaceful Alexandria. Well, and this is how it looks like in real life today. What we can see is that in Alexandria, the streets have apparently been renovated over the years, but otherwise it basically looks the same. The scene looks a bit different, but that's my fault because I'm standing at the wrong place here. I should have taken a few steps back here. Then you would have also seen this house on the left and on the right. I was a bit confused while I was standing here because I've read that they used a lot of sets here in the village, which means not every house that you can see in the show is actually real. So I thought these buildings here on the left and on the right might have been sets, but they weren't. I'm just standing at the wrong place here. I should have taken a few steps back. Anyway, what we can see in this scene is this building here in the background, which today is slightly hidden by a tree, but that is exactly the same building that we can also see in the show. This reverse shot of this whole scenery, however, fits quite well. Look here, I did everything right. We can see these buildings here on the right, we can see this building here on the left. They both still look the same as they did back in the show. Here on the right side we can see there is a sign, a yellow sign that says private property. I suspect there is a reason for that. I'm pretty sure I'm not the only Walking Dead fan walking around here. Anyway, you're only allowed to walk on the streets here. You can't walk on these properties here. And what we can also see in the scene of the show behind Rick is that they built this zombie walker wall here. And if I read that correctly, this wall actually still stood here a few months or years ago. Yeah, but when the show The Walking Dead ended, they also demolished this wall. So unfortunately, I'm a little bit too late. Here we can see this famous street once again from this perspective, from a close-up perspective. We can see Rick completely freaking out, and then he also turns the gun on his group. Here you can see this building once again in the background, which we already saw in the other scene. The trees have become much larger, and here on the right side there are also some little houses or a hut or something like that. They don't seem to be here anymore. And this is the last scene I'd like to show you from this place. This is where we can see, I think it's Enid, right? She's flirting here by the lake. Well, in this lake that we saw in several scenes of the show The Walking Dead actually also exists here in reality in Alexandria or Sinoia. However, there are also a few things that don't really exist here in Sinoia. And that is, for example, the Alexandria Church and also this windmill and stuff like that that you could see over and over again in the show. Those things were built as a set here on a meadow right next to this neighborhood. And all of those things were demolished when the show The Walking Dead was finished. Okay, now I'm a bit scared because I'm in the middle of the woods and the sun has set. Yeah, but there is one last shooting location I'd really like to show you today. And well, you already know it from my other shooting location tours. No horror movie, no horror show without at least one abandoned railroad track. And well, also in The Walking Dead there are a lot of them. And one of those, a quite iconic one, is right beside me, behind me. I can't see anything. Yeah, you probably remember this scene. It's in the 4th season of the show that the group sets off on an endlessly long journey along an old railway line. And at some point they arrive at this tower here. They take a short break and then a walker falls down from this tower. There are countless other scenes on these train tracks that I could have shown you. I decided to show you this one because it looks so incredibly creepy, especially at dusk. I just took a few photos here with long exposure so that you can see a bit more here. Well, and in this recording you can see, yeah, the tower still exists. It's exactly the same like we know it from the show. There is this staircase or something going down at the top. The internet says this tower is actually a coal tower. I'm not really sure what exactly that means because I'm not a train expert, but I would assume that coal was probably stored here for the railway. Yeah, but I think that was long time ago, and today this tower doesn't really seem to be in use anymore. It actually looks pretty abandoned. Here we can see this scene once again from this perspective. Here we can see the group around Glenn wandering around on the train tracks. The coal tower is today covered in a lot of graffiti, which wasn't the case back then when the show was filmed. And behind the tower we can see another small building, which you can also see in the show and which is still here today. A little disclaimer perhaps at this point. Even if I'm doing some recordings here, I'm not walking on the train tracks, and there is a reason for that. Unlike in the show, it seems like these train tracks are not actually abandoned. Those train tracks look like there are still trains running on them. There's also a railway crossing here where the cars always stop, which also means if you want to visit this place, don't walk around on the train tracks. There is a fairly large open space right next to these train tracks where you can walk along, so nothing will happen if a train comes. But yeah, I wouldn't recommend walking across these tracks here because I think they are still in use from time to time. Yeah, but now I think I have to get back to the car because it's really quite scary here in the bush at night. And if you haven't really noticed it yet, please listen to the soundscape here. All around me there are crickets and cicadas and I don't know what kind of animals. That's really quite an impressive soundscape here in the middle of nowhere. And if no walkers come to eat me here right next to the train tracks, I think this is the perfect end of today's filming location tour. So, here we are back in the hotel. That was a really long day once again, and that was a really hot day once again. Yeah, it was like, I think 35 degrees or something like that during the day. I'm really not used to those temperatures. 35 degrees Celsius, dear American friends. Yeah, I know you're wondering and you're already writing a comment. Celsius, that's a thing that really exists. Google it. Whatever. That was my The Walking Dead shooting location tour. I hope you liked it. If you did, then please leave a thumbs up. You can also hit the subscribe button and ring the bell so you won't miss any upcoming video. And if you'd like to support me and my work, you can also do that, for example, on Patreon. The link is in the description down below, or you can become a channel member on my YouTube channel. Then you will also get exclusive stuff, for example, all the addresses of the places I showed you in this video, and also new videos before everyone else, so you should check that out. That was my The Walking Dead shooting location tour. I hope you liked it. See you then. Have a safe journey. See you next time.